Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a Saturday morning panel. We're going to be talking today about 50 Shades of Collaboration. All of us here have been involved in a number of collaborative projects, and we wanted to kind of talk about, rather than just talk about what we did and the outcome, we wanted to talk about how we created the collaborations. So I'm a big fan of everyone introducing themselves. I'm Fergus Bell. I'm a consultant working with newsrooms, and I'm the co-founder of Pop-Up Newsroom.
Hello. Good morning. My name is Alba Mora. I work at AJ Español. We are based in Mexico, and we make videos for social media, basically.
Hi everybody, my name is Trewinnard. I'm the other co-founder of Pop-Up Newsroom and director of programs at Meedan, and we work on collaborations with different groups around the world all the time.
Okay, so we're going to start you off by talking about a little bit about Pop-Up Newsroom, and then we're going to dive into some of the issues that we faced as we've created collaborations, and Alba is going to talk very specifically about a huge collaboration we did in Mexico. So first of all, Pop-Up Newsroom is an initiative created by Meedan, who Tom works for, Dig Deeper, who I work for, and essentially we try to create collaborative journalism projects using design thinking. A lot of people say, like, oh, what's the perfect thing for a Pop-Up Newsroom or a collaboration? And why would anyone want to be involved? So we have to have a reason when we create a collaboration. And the reason that we can use to sell to a lot of news partners is you will get out more than you put in, which goes down pretty well. We're going to find something that we couldn't do without a collaboration. And most importantly, it will end. No one wants to get stuck in a collaboration forever. They want to know that it ends because they want to go and take away whatever they got out of it. So we use a method of design thinking with kind of newsroom innovation techniques, and we focus a lot on making things happen in person and sprints. So we look at things like product design, editorial innovation, new business models. And we kind of work with a mantra, especially with some of the projects that we've done most recently, which involve kind of news gathering on a mass scale, that there's no point in being able to find news if you can't communicate it, process it, verify it, and publish it, and do that very quickly. So we'll talk through some of this in a bit more detail, but essentially we always start off by framing the issue by using statement starters. So how might we, in what ways might we tackle this very specific problem? And we realized that editorial people by themselves are not very good at innovating when it comes to technology. They think of things that they want, even if they're not potentially the right technical fit. So we work to bring technologists into the room at the same time as we're creating these initiatives, so that we go through this process of looking, understanding, and making. And this is kind of what we'll talk you through in a moment. And then we come up with workflows, which map everything out, and we use this as our kind of guidance through the project. And then finally, if possible, we get physical, and we create a physical space to operate in, because you can't replicate that feeling of a newsroom digitally yet. The more we observe how we can do it in real life, the closer we can get to replicating it digitally. But the case has been proven for getting everyone together. So I want to hand over to Tom to talk a little bit about kind of why people might want to collaborate.
So it's very important when you're talking about collaboration that you understand, like, what's the value, like what is collaboration gonna let us achieve that wouldn't otherwise be possible. And basically the mantra that we have is that particularly for kind of bigger initiatives, or even looking at ways that we can move things like technology for newsrooms forward, we're stronger together. And what we find in pop-up newsrooms is the more we're able to bring in diverse perspectives and diverse voices, whether that's from local newsrooms, national newsrooms, print, broadcast, radio, student journalists, technologists, civil society, researchers. When you start to look at a problem and incorporate all of those perspectives, you really are able to kind of reframe what you're trying to do in a way that can benefit from the input and expertise from all of those stakeholders. So we basically design with the thinking that we're stronger together. That was a Verificado mantra. And we have some principles for how we interact in those in that collaboration. So one is transparency. We're very open about who we are, what we're trying to do. Often we work with commercial newsrooms, and they're very transparent that their needs, whatever kind of comes out of a collaboration, has to meet business needs, which is not always, the most kind of. It's not kind of sexy from a collaboration perspective, but we have to sort of, when we're designing these projects, we really have to take into account the kind of practical realities of the groups we're working with. Attribution is key. The one thing that everybody is really worried about when they collaborate is that their work is not going to get recognized, but rather that either somebody else in the collaboration or the collaboration writ large will take credit. And so we always try and ensure that ideas and content and processes are very attributed to the people who've helped us design them and come up with them. And then finally, communication. I think there can be no collaboration without communication. And again, I think this kind of ties back into transparency. We always try and build communication processes into projects that allow for full visibility of communication amongst the key stakeholders. So these are three things that whatever we do, we always trying to keep these in mind. And now, in terms of why collaborate, and a lot of our collaborations are focused because of our expertise in kind of verification and news gathering. Why collaborate? One of the things that we are kind of dealing with right now is this proliferation either of kind of misinformation or user-generated content that's traveling very fast, very wide, and it's very difficult for any one newsroom to be across all of these things. So if we're looking at misinformation in Mexico, for example, we could work with one newsroom, but they're only ever going to see a very narrow slice of the problem. And so the more that we can work with other organizations, the better sense that we can have in a quicker sense of what are the problems and what are we trying to do. So we're trying to deal with a kind of scale challenge. Amidst that scale challenge and amidst the kind of current business environment of journalism, which is that many newsrooms have very limited resources, there's a real risk that if we're not collaborating and coordinating, then we can be doing duplicate work. And this is a particular concern. Like I live in the US at the moment, and when Donald Trump tweets something, there's fact checkers in maybe 5 or 6 different newsrooms who will dedicate 2, 3, 5 hours to debunking the same tweet. Now, journalistically, there's no value in the duplicate work there, right? It doesn't need to happen. And actually, my suspicion is that this can be a strategy by people who want to distract journalists, who know that if I say this thing, I can get all the journalists working on this tweet. In the meantime, I'm undermining some environmental policy while nobody's watching. And so, one of the key goals of Pop-Up Newsroom is to look at where is kind of no value adding duplicate work happening in processes, whether it's news gathering or fact checking or technology development, and how can we make sure that we're using our collective resources most efficiently and not working in a duplicate way. Another benefit of collaboration is that it usually generates a lot of content. All of the content that comes through pop-up newsroom collaborations is available to all of the collaborators. So this is one way we can incentivize. If you're always going to get more out than you put in to a collaboration, right? Because if AJ Plus puts in a certain amount of stuff, there's 5 or 6 or 90 other organizations who are also putting stuff in, and that benefits the work of AJ Plus, for example. And finally, we have this challenge of noise. This is particularly in the misinformation space. We are all trying to connect with audiences in an extremely noisy information ecosystem. When we collaborate and find ways to coordinate distribution of fact checks, for example, or of debunks, we can be much more effective in cutting through the noise and making sure that the people who need to see this information are getting that.
Thanks. Alba, I promise you can speak in a moment.
No, that's
if there's one more gif of me, I'm walking off this panel.
Okay. Yeah. So, can I just premise
Sure.
what you're about to talk about with kind of how we got to a point with Verificado in terms of the design part. So, when we're designing a pop-up newsroom, we use this co-design method. Which means a lot of post-its in order to kind of map out all of the challenges, and we have a framing event where we start wide and we zero in, and we kind of have all of these kind of areas that we will think about specific to the problem. And one of the kind of key initiatives that we created in this way, kind of one of the most successful ones was Verificado in Mexico. And Alba, if you can kind of explain what that was.
Sure. Before I start, I would like to know how many people in the room has been in a journalism collaborative project. Please raise your hand. How many of you would repeat this experience? Okay, that's hopeful. Right, so could I show you? Verificado was for me the first time that I participated in any sort of collaborative journalism experience, and it just blew my mind, like how exponentially, like the power of the journalism just exponentially grows. It's really amazing. So before I talk about what we did exactly, I want to give some context, because probably not all of you are familiar with, Mexico and presidential elections. This was last year, so we built this collaboration. There was 3 co-founding partners, and that was one level of the Verificado. But then, with these 3 organizations, we built one main core newsroom, right? And this is how it looked like when it was physical. But all the media that you see here, 90 plus different types of media outlets and universities, NGOs, came together and joined the initiative. But they came as allies or partners. So what I want to say with this is that there were different levels of implication, right? So they didn't necessarily have to work on fact-checking and verification with us. We would provide them with the information. Say, on the evening, we would send a newsletter with 4 stories that we fact-checked or verified, so all of them would get that newsletter with the information, just like a news agency, so that they would be able to publish the next day, whether they were, like a radio station or. And if you might not be familiar with the media who was involved, but really you have a very wide spectrum of editorial lines that go from, far right to the far left, to go from digital natives such as, Vice and BuzzFeed to really traditional media like El Universal or even Televisa, a big network in Mexico. And that was beautiful. And that was unheard of in Mexico City. Not city, but in Mexico as a country, because we were able to involve local media as well. So not everything was so focused on the capital. I thought that was beautiful as well.
On this point, one of the challenges that we identified in kind of design process was, and it is true of all of these projects that look at kind of fact-checking and verification, is if you only work with fact-checkers, and you're only ever going to reach the existing audience that they have, right? And most of those people probably are aware of the problem. And so you're not really, if you only work with a narrow group of organizations, then you're only ever going to reach a small piece of the problem, and it's not the main challenge. Through collaboration, through working with Televisa, who have a massive audience, you're able to kind of spread the credible work, the really kind of solid journalistic work that was happening in the newsroom. That was able to connect with many, many, many more audiences. I think the combined Facebook audiences of all of our partners was more than the population of Mexico, for example. So this kind of distribution challenge is also one that can be addressed through collaboration.
Here's a bit of an outlook. Like, we had a website, yes, but we also created social media accounts that did not belong to any of the partners. So it was like this neutral account where we would replicate content from all of us. We also had like a hashtag, and thanks God, it only went on for four months. So, like, I think that a time period constraint is key, because sustaining collaboration, it's exhausting. Like, that's honestly. So here's some numbers just to give you an idea. It was just 4 months. So I'm going to talk about a bit more about our role. We had very clear in mind that it's not just about fact-checking and writing the text, but it also it's about creating media that is able to break the filter bubble, the different filter bubbles or different echo rooms that all these different audiences belonging to all these different media outlets. So really what collaboration allowed to us was reaching audiences that otherwise, really, I don't know how would that, happen. And because it was presidential elections, and because it was about fighting misinformation, to me, what was more key of all of these challenges we have, is this one. How do we truly achieve a journalism of service? How do we really, make facts outstand, and so that we all share this common ground of, what's real, what's not, right? So this is like a mental map I've made of the initiative. At the very center, you would have the Verificado newsroom, like these 15 people who are only working and producing content for Verificado. That means fact checkers who write tech stories, yes. That means like video producers who produce, like videos about, debunks, for example, like this photo is a fake, it's a montage, blah, blah, blah. So, and we had, of course, the social media accounts, but what was beautiful about this collaboration was that content replicated to all our partners, and they would pick up and choose. So they weren't like tied to, okay, we have to publish everything that they send us. No. So some TV stations would have, like Televisa is a very big media network, so they would have, in the daily newscast in the evening, they would have like this little section where they would highlight a particular story that we made. Or, the national and local traditional newspapers would print now and then a story, and they would credit, Verificado. So everyone was very proud of belonging, but not because they had to do anything, but because we were of service to them, to all the partners. So it was like very easy for them to just, you know, the radio, the digital media as well, to just like pick up our contents and replicate them. So there's these different levels of implication. That for me was key, because you cannot force everyone to be as compromised with the project as you are necessarily, right? I don't know if I want to, but well, for us, the team of AJ Plus, that was our focus, like really produce content that was easily shareable, that was, you know, easily replicated on social media. And we've built this WhatsApp channel, which I thought was very important, because really, like, fake news travels on WhatsApp in Mexico City. That was like the front line of misinformation. And that's another level of collaboration as well, because you are like the audience, this was an on-demand service, so the audience would forward these messages or audio files or articles that they would, you know, get on their WhatsApp groups, send it to us, so we would debunk or fact check, and then send back, right, the information. So we were also collaborating with the audience actively. Here's some screenshots, WhatsApp team, and I think that's about it.
Show the video.
Yeah.
So.
This is like the wrap-up video at the end of the initiative. Yeah, this was like the goodbye video, and it was actually very beautiful because the audience would respond to the video like, what do you mean? Like you go now? Like fake news continue and misinformation continues and now you just leave? It was hard because we really realized there's a huge need of, you know, like this sort of like compass to navigate what's what, right? I just want to close with, so this idea that Fergus said that you get more when you collaborate, I just was blown by the impact that the initiative had. I didn't have any expectation like that. Like, this is just like a compilation of different, you know, media that covered not the content, but the initiative itself. So it gave us, all of us, I think, a great exposure. And that was remarkable. Like lots, you know, it's a hot topic as well. But the fact that we were so many organizations, more than 90 organizations who were on this, it was meaningful. And just to close, I want to say that yes, Verificado lasted for 4 months, and we hired a team, with AJ Plus, we hired a team of 5 multimedia producers. for the initiative. So it was 4 months. But when it finished, we said, hey, there's a lot of value that we created, a lot of know-how, like how to fact-check or how to debunk videos, how to work with, still images or audio files and see how they've been tampered or not. So this team stayed with AJ Plus, so we absorbed it and we created this vertical called Verifica, AJ Plus Verifica, which basically, it's been a huge gain for the newsroom as well, like just how we've been integrating fact-checking and verification on our daily reporting, right? So that to me was also learning, like maybe the particular project lasts for 4 months, but you never know what will be the long-term result, which in our way was unexpected, to be honest.
Thank you.
And that's all.
So we'll dive into a little bit into some of these kind of issues that came up, but if we could go to my screen now. So getting stakeholders involved in these kinds of collaborations is one of the biggest challenges. And we've found that designing with the stakeholders keeps everyone together, because everyone who is involved in that design process feels a level of ownership. And I can't remember where this line came out. Tom's looking at the GIF like, what? So we've been trying to work out what slice of the pie in terms of competition or in terms of the problem everyone can agree with. So we're not saying put competition aside completely. We're saying what slice of the whole operation could we just focus on and put competition aside for that. And we use a number of kind of approaches to this. So we think about pain points. We ask everyone in the room, what is the challenge that you are facing? And that helps us to work out where there is common ground, where people might be willing to collaborate in order to kind of scale. We also think about kind of where there are blockages in the process. And so this helps us to work out where we can come in and help fix things. Have a slide malfunction here. We also, I don't know, did you show the picture of the newsroom? But this is the newsroom. So we even think about how we're going to get everyone working and getting on in the same space, and how we can mix people together. And I think in terms of stakeholders, maybe you recognize some of the things that I've raised. Like, getting everyone together in a room is difficult.
And I thought it was very helpful to have an organization involved that doesn't necessarily produce content. In that case was Pop-Up Newsroom, because for Animal Politico and AJ Plus, we were focusing really on, like we are journalists. We are like, oh, what's the story, blah, blah, not very focused on that. But Tom and Fergus were able to get like the bigger picture and like structure workflows, structure the newsroom. Like
I'm glad you want to talk about workflows. Okay.
So you need that kind of other person who does that, because otherwise it's just like, well.
I think in Verificado was really interesting was, and this is kind of a value of collaboration, right? We had Animal Politico, they're amazing fact checkers. They have their IFCN signatories. They're the first fact checking group in Mexico. They have like a very specific skill set. They bring what they bring. AJ Español is doing this amazing innovation in terms of visual production work that nobody else is doing. We are looking at the kind of workflows and structure, but for one of these projects to succeed, you need the kind of the differences. We're not kind of similar organizations in size or in scope in many ways, but the kind of complementary skills that we bring are really important. And when we're thinking about collaborations, we're always trying to identify what's the missing piece. How can we make sure we have really diverse skills and experiences in the room so that we can kind of drive.
And one of the kind of main pillars of this collaborative approach is that everything that we do is we talk about and we publish, and we can say, you know, it's all out there. If you want to take it as it is and copy it, that's great. Go ahead and do that. We would prefer if you involved us, because then we can learn from that one and take it into the next one. But we try to iterate each time. And it was really nice working with AJ Plus, who embraced that and talk about it. And your work on Verificado has already inspired lots of other collaborations. So I want to just show you this kind of process of iteration between them. One of the first ones that we worked on before Pop-Up became a kind of established initiative was Electionland. So this is a workflow from Electionland, where we had lots of different organizations, lots of different universities and J schools who were feeding news gathering information into the main newsroom. We then had people analyzing it. We then had a national desk that would produce it. We broke everything down into signals and data and what mapped out all of the tools. And we go through this process in every situation. We then, you know, even work out exactly what people have open on their workstations, so that we can standardize this process as much as possible. So that was in 2016. You look at 2018, and we're able to, we've iterated, and we can be a lot more complex. And this process isn't complex, but what we've done is map it out so that we can constantly do like a health check on the process. So, you know, and we assign individuals names, so we make it specific. So you can see on here like Alba's functions. Alba's role had specific functions in terms of assigning stories, in terms of signing off on things. And we established a number of different verification processes. We even map out the tools that we can use. We can then transplant this to another initiative and tweak it and improve it. And so maybe when the next Verificado comes around, if it comes around, this will have been built on and learned from other lessons, rather than having to wait in country for the next election cycle. We even think about the humans. So we try to match the digital workflow to the physical workflow. So this was the layout of the newsroom in Mexico City. And we didn't just do this to kind of keep people in order. We did it to make sure that the flow of information went from here to here to here, so that this person could walk over to this desk and say, hey, I've done this, and this person could go over to this desk and say, please, can you do this? We also make sure that everyone huddles. So this has been a successful technique. Kind of lastly, in verification, in these kinds of projects, we need to think about technology as well. So I'm going to kind of throw over to Tom, and he's not seen these slides, but we're doing something in India at the moment where we've had to really use technology to adapt to a situation. So you can.
Yes, so obviously one of the challenges, especially when you're working in kind of digital content and misinformation, is how can we effectively pass data between a group of collaborators, and how can we build structures for analysis that allow for remote working. And so we're thinking a lot about the tools. Meedan, the organization I work for, is primarily a technology organization, and so we have kind of taken a lot of learnings from these different projects, and take also the kind of challenges that each one is going to face, and try and build tools flexibly that can meet a lot of different use cases and support a lot of collaboration. So this is a kind of visual of what's happening in India right now. With our partners there, Proto, who are doing a lot of research into misinformation that's being shared on WhatsApp. So we had a workshop in India. We got 25 stakeholders into a room. We said, there's an election coming up. You're journalists. What's the problem that you're going to face? They identified a bunch of problems. They said, some of these we want to be competitive on. So we said, okay, these are out of scope. What are the pieces that you don't think that there's competition around? And we identified this need of the communal rumors, which are particularly high impact and high risk. And there's not a lot of good research to kind of understand how these things spread. And so we designed, from our perspective, we can bring kind of technological know-how. we can understand the journalistic and editorial inputs, and we tried to build a tool that could sit and solve some of these problems in a way that's collaborative and makes use of new and emergent technologies, and supports the work of the kind of partners that we're engaged with. So
I'm just going to jump in. We also had one of the kind of really nice things about the work that we've been doing globally is that we had Diana, Alba's colleague, come and talk to the Indian newsrooms about Verificado, and it freaked everyone out because they were like, "This is so different to what we have here," and it's huge. But actually, they could see how we started from the beginning and built it up, and then we took them through that process, and that was a really nice thing to be able to do, to kind of connect the initiatives. And actually, we did something in Sweden. And one of the guys who was involved in the Sweden project is now in Delhi, helping kind of bring some of the lessons from that into India as well. So we're kind of collaboration upon collaboration, which is nice. Sorry, Tom, I interrupted you. Just show you what this kind of thing looks like, actually.
Oh, great. I might use this slide in a bit.
Okay.
So basically, the tool that we set up. One of the things that we learned from Verificado is that responding to questions on WhatsApp manually is a thankless and exhausting task. And when we went to India, WhatsApp's huge in India. All the stakeholders there identified this, and we knew that whatever we could do manually would just never.
It might be worth Alba explaining the manual process for dealing with WhatsApp as it was in Verificado.
The bottom line, it's painful, and it's not designed for that. And that basically, like I said, okay, anyway, we'll build a team of 5 people who are gonna. No, you cannot, because basically you have 2 sessions open, one on your cell phone and the other one on your laptop. So it's 2 people who can work on WhatsApp at the same time.
And they did it every day for
every
3 months.
Yeah.
Manually responding.
Just for WhatsApp, it's insane.
So after Verificado, WhatsApp released a new product called the Business API that lets us integrate technology more closely into this process. And so what we've set up is a way for people to send the project something that they are seeing and that they're worried about, might be a rumor, or they want to know if it's real or false. There's a research center in Delhi who's gathering all that data, which is more data than you can ever imagine. Is an absolutely Sisyphean task. But as these researchers go through the process of analyzing this data, they're creating a big database. And so basically what that means is, and what WhatsApp lets us do, is make that database accessible to the public in a way that if they send us something that we've already checked and is already in the database, it will get returned very nicely with a status saying, okay, this is something that actually we've seen, and we can say this is true. And there's a link to the full process. So the India project really is a kind of research exercise, but we don't want to do that kind of in a vacuum. We want to make sure that the data that's being created is also accessible to people. And so this is how we're exposing that. People can send us a request. If it's something that we've seen, they'll get the result back. There's a nice image card that gets shared with it. And they can also see the process. Like, this is the information that the analysts have added. They said, okay, we've done the reverse image search and we found it to be original. So we're trying to be also transparent about why the researchers kind of reached the conclusions that they did.
And one of the things we learned from Verificado was actually how to build media literacy elements into the type of outputs. So one of the most successful types of content in Verificado was the kind of explainer content.
The tutorials?
Yeah.
Like how to check it yourself, like how to fact check it with yourself on your phone, for example, like how to do an image reverse search on Google to check if a photo of something is, from 2 years ago, or it's actually like a current image. Things like that were very successful. Also, like, also like more like deeper, more like complex information, like how does you know, misinformation work? Like what are the patterns? Like helping the audience understand the bigger picture also was very successful in Verificado.
So we took that, and so where you see here the researchers as they go through things and they perform a check on the photo or the image, they will click we have done a reverse image search on this, and you can see the result of that reverse image search to show that it was the original or not the original, and then there's a link for any context. So we built on top of that to make this, to build the media literacy into this kind of data set. Actually, this is the whole process. So these are all of the checks that go into a piece, like a photo or a piece of content that comes in. And anytime one of these is checked, it will display on that final card, which we think will allow people to kind of see that process and make up their own mind. We'll go to some questions in a moment. We've got a number of these collaborations going on at the moment. We've got something in Moldova. We are helping with this election project in India, Indonesia. We're also turning this kind of methodology to creating a playbook for how to create a collaboration around a natural disaster. Obviously, you don't have any warning that a hurricane is about to hit. You have like 48 hours notice. So we're working out how a collaboration could be set up, how we have all the rules for setting up such a collaboration so that it can be implemented as soon as we know that it's going to hit. We're also looking at conflict and humanitarian crisis, and next, in a couple of weeks, we turn our attention to 2020 to put a lot of what we've got together into a project for that. So it'd be great to throw it open to some questions. If anyone's got a question. Oh. You're like a TV host walking.
So what happens after collaboration ends, how we can sustain a relationship with our partners, and I really like what you did after Verificado. Other question for Alba, Verificado is a great success for engagement. This is something that we try to do and replicate in other collaborations. I know that you mentioned some tips on engagement, but how we can make fact checks more interesting for the audience, and I would really appreciate your input there. Thank you.
Do you want to answer first about the first question, or?
No.
I think in terms of ongoing collaborations, I think Verificado was kind of a very intensive period of work, and collaborations on that level, it's very as Alba described, it can be very kind of draining. You know, it's but you know that and so I think it's in those kind of collaborations where you can say this needs to end. Actually, on the Moldova initiative, we're looking more longer term, and so we're trying not to get into this kind of very busy, high octane mode. We're trying to do a slower burn to see what happens. Can we sustain a collaboration beyond a 3 or 4 month period? So I think it's something that we want to kind of experiment with.
And it's driven by people in the room.
And yeah,
it's one of their needs. We need it to end, and we can build that in.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it varies, but I'm interested in looking at that moving forward. And
then regarding the engagement, fact checking is hard. Like, it's when you read these articles about, because they need to be very transparent on the methodology. Like, how did you reach that conclusion? So these are very long texts that are very detailed, and most of times tedious to read. I'm being very blunt, but the reality of it is that it's not for everyone. Like, how do you make it for younger audiences, or how do you make it for people who, they just basically need to know, is this right or wrong, or is this false or not so true, or deceiving, or, so I think part of it was bringing it down to the language of the people, like the most common people language that I think fact checkers traditionally talk to an audience who is, you know, like policymakers, people with PhDs, which is a niche audience that it's you know, very important and very, but if you want to engage a broader audience, you need to change the way you talk, and you need to change, I think you need to speak video, you need to speak memes, you need to speak GIF, you need to speak WhatsApp, you need to speak the language of even like the fakers, you know, like the people who produce the misinformation, they know very well how to shape that narratives in a, you know, very current and present language. So I think that's key, you know, like just without simplifying, right? Like being professional and being, but yeah, I think that was key. And before I forget, I brought stickers, so the sticker lovers who are here, like I'm gonna leave them here and just come and pick it up.
Any other questions?
Thank you. I wanted to know how the whole process, you know, how the collaboration started actually, who approached who, why, and how was the process of getting 90 entities on board?
So actually, sadly, Diana Larrea couldn't be here today, but she, I think, had seen some of the work that Fergus and I had done, and we had done some work with her. And so she flagged, said, look, there's elections coming up in Mexico. It's a huge, there's a huge misinformation risk. Mexico has a long history of kind of social network manipulation on behalf of the state and internal and external actors. So is one of the you know, most important challenges. It's not just the presidential election, there was national, local. And so she reached out to us and said, look, we could use your expertise. At the same time, she contacted Daniel Moreno from Animal Politico and said, look, she had kind of identified what were the kind of key skills needed on the project, which is something that we also try and do. And so we started to kind of workshop ideas around how could this work. That process is long. I think we started talking about Verificado a full year before we launched, and so, you know, there's a lot of things to iron out. You know, getting funding as a collaboration is challenging, and you have to all be on the same page. You have to make sure you have the same kind of values journalistically. So that's an ongoing a kind of a process that requires a lot of communication and a lot of honesty, I think. And one of the things that was nice about the Verificado coalition is that everybody was very frank. We knew what we were trying to do, what we weren't trying to do, and where each group's kind of skills lay. And so I think the earlier you can kind of identify the roles that each organization and each person within the organization is going to play in the collaboration, then, you know, the kind of clarity around that is really important, because it can be very frustrating to be in the middle of a collaboration and not really sure what your role is or where you fit in. And so one of the reasons we make those big workflows is because it lets anybody, whether you're the kind of journalist who's finding stuff, or whether you're the social media producer making the video, or you're the assignment editor, you can see really clearly, like, where do you fit in? Where's my place? And I think that we found a really good method for kind of articulating that and getting consensus on that. It's also not a case of me and Fergus saying this is how it's going to be. We can't. The process that you go to get to that collaboration will determine whether the collaboration is successful. And so we focus a lot on this kind of process.
We've got time for two more quick questions. We've got okay, one more question. Yeah.
Just very quickly, you just mentioned it yourself. The funding is a really hard job. Where did it come from? How did you go about?
So Verificado was mainly funded by the Facebook Journalism Project and Google News Initiative. I think there was also some smaller support from Open Society foundations. You know, at the same time as we're doing these collaborations, we're also trying to make the case to people with money who have an interest in seeing these projects succeed, that you know, we can do good work if we have support. That's always a negotiation, and it's long, and if you've applied for funding through those processes, you know that it's challenging. But yeah, that's one of the things that we can bring to the table. I write grant proposals for Meedan all the time. Alba probably not so much. And so again, we're thinking about like what skills and experience do different people in the collaboration play, and so finding somebody who can write the grant and make those funding dots, super important. Yeah. Although I can't contribute, as you know, I can't make nice videos, but I can get some money.
We have to wrap up. Thank you very much, everyone, and get
Thank
stickers.
You.